I dug the movie that you sent over. I appreciate you sending a copy. It's quite intense, but there's so many things that I want to get into with that and
Sure.
your life. So thank you for taking a minute. I'd appreciate it.
No worries at all. Happy
So
to.
so real quick, I think we're all getting tired of the whole COVID thing and talking about it, but it was such a
Right.
game changer for so many people. It shifted
Right.
us in so many ways. How did you get through that time period and how did it change you?
COVID. Yeah, I mean, I focused back in on the basics. I've been more of a producer director my whole life. I didn't actually do any editing or other things, but because of the difficulties in getting in touch with people, working with people, I ended up doing more myself. So I think it was became a little bit more of an intimate project where I was even more like, writing, editing, directing, and it gave me a lot of time to think about, what happened. I think normally a movie doesn't take almost 7 years to complete. So there was a lot of extra thinking and a lot of reflection. So I think it was a time for reflection and time to learn new skills for me.
So let's get to the brass tacks of what you do on a daily
Hmm.
basis. I'm going to put
Hmm.
you in front of a bunch of grade schoolers, third graders. It's career
Sure.
day, and one of the kids says, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" How do you answer
Hmm.
them?
I'm a documentary filmmaker. I enjoy exploring cultures and subcultures. There's a lot of different places out in the world where they have different traditions and different ways of doing things, and I've always found that fascinating. And there's lots of subcultures that are the same. So I make films about cultures. I make films about the way people live and try to explain and trying to find the gold in their way of living.
So what did you want to be when you were growing up in the third grade? Was it going to be film?
Yeah, yeah, always. I know actually at one point I wanted to be a pilot, I suppose.
Oh,
But I don't have the eyesight to be a pilot. So it was either a pilot or a filmmaker, and pilot quickly became something I couldn't do. So, filmmaker became even more clear. I had my
so
first job at the local newspaper at 14 years old,
wow.
paid the princely sum of $5 per picture if it was published. So I had to take it, process it, submit it, and if it was published, I made $5. I think the biggest paycheck I ever got out of that job was about 15 bucks.
Wow. So take me back to where you were born and raised. What were these seeds of loving film and being visual? How did all of this kind of take root and grow into
Sure.
you?
I think it probably you have to blame my uncle. I remember him explaining photography, and he had a dark room at the time. So showing me how to, take pictures on film and develop the film. And it just seemed kind of magical, to sort of click and then light somehow got put on thing that you'd slowly see that image appear and then being able to manipulate that image. I liked there was some magic to it, I guess. And I was probably 12 at the time and got so into it. Yeah, so at 14, I was working as a photographer.
So what was the first film that really captivated you that made you think you want to do that one day?
Oh boy. I think the correct answer usually is Citizen Kane, but I think Citizen Kane was something I liked. I think probably Dead Poet Society.
Okay.
There was something about that movie and about seizing the day, and what I think he quotes Emerson a lot in that movie, and it was that each may contribute a line into the great poem of life or something like that. Everybody gets to contribute a verse. What will your verse be? And yeah, I've always been fascinated by understanding other cultures and other people, so decided I wanted to contribute with that.
So there's a lot of different avenues that you could have taken to be a
Hmm.
storyteller and a filmmaker.
Sure.
What is it about the documentary realm that captivated you and made that your focus?
Um, I like reality. I think reality is actually more interesting. I've always sort of, I mean, a good drama is great, sure, but I don't know. I find good documentary stories with real people more interesting. Obviously, it's more believable because generally it's more real. Just more sincere, more honest, more yeah, less bullshit, The old days of American movies, it was always sort of fairly black and white who the cowboy, the good guys wore white and the bad guys wore black. And at an early age, I realized that that was bullshit. And later, I mean, last 20, 30 years, it's more nuanced, it's a little closer to the truth. But yeah, documentary just seemed truer to me. And also it let me be more active and takes more time. So instead of like 50 people or 100 people, working together for 2 weeks. You can be one or two people working together for a couple of years. I like that style.
Yeah. What was the first film where you got a visceral reaction that validated the work that you're doing and you really felt like this is what I need to be doing with my life?
First film that I made or that I worked on or that I
Did
saw. Uh,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
any of the above, I suppose. Um, I worked on a travel piece for a company called Intrepid out of Australia in Namibia. And part of the process was to spend a week with the San Bushmen in northern Namibia. And it was just amazing to see how they lived, and really gave me kind of this visceral, like, wow, you really don't need a lot in life if you have the skills. And I don't know who said it, but there's this expression about the more things you own, the more those things own you. And just realizing I could have a simpler life and didn't need a lot of the accoutrement and all the stuff that we're sort of taught we need to buy. So it just really connected, like it was a big sort of aha moment that, and ever since then I've lived very simply. I prefer, having around 100 possessions and being able to live all over the world and do what I want.
That almost seems like, making film, you're exposing and showing these different subcultures and these
Hmm.
different realms of life that people don't get to see. But by proxy, just like you said, you've learned something and you've changed your life. Over this process, over your career, what else has happened to you that's been monumental in this process that was unexpected, that you learned about yourself and changed?
I think, if I'm honest, a lot of the beginning of my life in travels was running away, kind of running away from a small town, running away from conventionality, running away from a world I didn't feel like I fit in. And there became a point maybe 15 years ago where I started feeling like I was running to something again. And I remember just sitting on a beach and looking at the sunset and realizing that, I've learned what I need to learn. Now it's time to sort of, because I was lucky enough to see so many different perspectives and so many cultures, now it's time to tell that story back. What, for me, the biggest and most important thing is to try and understand everybody, have compassion for everybody, even if they're at war with each other, to try to not just pick a side, try and understand both sides. That's the best way to diffuse it than just saying, oh, that one's bad, one's good. Try and understand each side and realize that there probably isn't any fundamental truths. It's all just opinions. And probably the best thing is to be compassionate and understanding. So, yeah, sitting on a beach about 15 years ago, I felt like I was starting to run back to the world.
So 137 countries in 30
Mhm.
years. I know you're working and you're doing your job, but a part of you is also being a voyeur and traveling and seeing these parts. What has been one of the most unexpectedly magical places on this planet that just blew you away and you didn't expect it?
Probably Mongolia. You get to the Altai, to the upper regions near the Russian border, and nothing's changed in 1,000 years. I mean, people dress the same. They live in little tents the same. The main mode of transportation is horse. Nothing has changed. They might have a little few plastic items, and they'll often have a little satellite TV that they can watch about an hour of TV from. But for the most part, nothing's changed, and they're happy. And it was just such a simple, beautiful place that just you'd almost think it doesn't really exist on this earth today, but it does. And it's a beautiful life, an interesting life. I mean, I wouldn't want to live it because of, you have to grow up in that lifestyle to be able to handle it, but still just amazing blow away place that very few people have ever been to. And it's a place that is truly magical.
My preference for film is documentary for what you described before about it's one of the more real depictions of what we live on this
Right,
planet. Have
right.
you seen that film that Rainn Wilson did where he went and tried to find out the happiest places on the planet?
I have not. I
Okay.
have not.
So Rainn has always kind of had this level of depression and being unhappy. And he finally got to a point where he's like, I'm the successful guy. I've been in the office. I've been in movies. I've done all this. Why? Why can't I find the happiness? He's married. He has kids and all this stuff. So he starts traveling. And the first place he goes to is Iceland. And
Hmm.
they're one of the happiest places on the planet. And,
Hmm.
according to him, and then Bulgaria was one of the most depressing places. And he just kind of went through all of this. And it's just like you said there with Mongolia, like he discovered that the people that are there, the more base that they get, like with Iceland, it's really about terrain. No matter where you turn and go to, there's beauty all around. Because of the weather, you have to pivot so much. But it was interesting how he orchestrated this tapestry of what makes the human mind happy and how he went through
Mm,
it. And that seems to be what you've done by proxy and deliberately throughout your life. You've seen this
hmm.
this cornucopia of living on this planet that has to give you such a broad view and such a level of empathy.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I think happiness means different things for different people. I have a sort of a sense I'm happiest when I'm feeling sort of bittersweet kind of thing, where it's sort of sad and happy at the same time. Somehow that feels truer to me. I think the world is incredibly beautiful and incredibly horrible all at the same time at any given moment. It's really just our mind, how we process it and filter it, and by what metrics. So if we're measuring on how many people are actually laughing, or how many people have a smile on their face, or how much money they have, or health, and what it's all just metrics. If you want to look at everything is magically beautiful, everything literally, but there's also everything sort of in some countries they'll look at it as well. Actually, creation and destruction is actually just part of nature. We do this, and some people will say that is what it is to be enlightened, is to sort of see past the attachments of valuing different things, of saying this is good and this is bad. So I don't know. For me, at least, true happiness is trying to get past any notions of trying to think of what anything is happy and sad, and that the truth is everything is both. If that makes any sense.
It totally does. And a part of me thinks a friend of mine told me years ago, he used to get anxiety going to his in-laws.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
someone told him, go in with no expectations, just erase any
Hmm.
expectations. And it almost
Hmm.
seems like that's one of the best things to do when you walk into a
Hmm.
situation because the expectations is the bane that we carry with us.
Absolutely. The Buddhists will always say that well, more Zen, I suppose, is this notion that there is no path, there is no future, there is only ever now. That's it. So be in this moment.
Yeah.
Don't come loaded with a bunch of baggage that you're going to, oh, this person's going to try and get me out of gotcha question, or the in-laws are going to just walk in with fresh eyes to every situation. You know, I think it's hard for people to recognize that it's okay to be of two minds. It's still okay to be careful and not go in the bad part of town. You shouldn't necessarily trust everyone you want. It's okay to have the sort of street sense, common sense kind of thing. But that's like a shield that you carry sometimes, but don't be that person.
Yeah.
Carry your shield, but be an open person, So to be of those two minds, yeah, sure, keep a shield, but at the same time, be ready to let that shield down and engage with this person, no matter who they are or what they are or where they are, and try and understand where they come from. And,
So,
for me, that actually this closest thing to happiness for me is to try and figure stuff out.
that's one of I have a jazz radio show, and that's one of the things that I love talking to musicians about. Like they
Hmm.
always go in to these scenarios of the unknown and make something beautiful out of it. And it's one time, man. It's like life. It's like it's just this moment. They made the best out of it, and there you go. It's a beautiful mindset.
I'm paraphrasing Alan Watts, but he uses music as a metaphor a lot because it's the perfect example of being there in the moment, enjoying what's happening. Otherwise, we're not listening to a piece of music trying to get to the end of it.
Yeah.
We're just there.
Yeah.
There's no point in trial. Oh, I hope that. Okay, I can't wait for the end. That which just seems to be what humans do. Like, okay, well, I'll get through this, and then I'll get to the end I
Uh-huh.
want. Music is just, no, I'm here. I'm enjoying it. Nobody dances to get from one side of the room to the other side of the room. They dance to be in the moment. Nobody listens to music to get from the beginning to the end of it. They should be in the moment. And I don't know. That's the closest thing to truth, I think.
So Ouch Kink is your latest movie. It's wonderful. And the one thing that stands out in this, and I want to kind of get into you making this in the methodology, but there was at one point early on where there was a gal that was saying that we're doing things that a lot of people out there would never do, but they do more horrible things, and we're at least honest and open about it. It almost seems like a metaphor for the whole culture of what you were trying to kind of dig into.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, touch for me, the whole thing was to try and show the difference between Because frankly, if you slap someone across the face, for example, that's violence. If they want you to slap them across the face, consent to that. You do it, and you check in with them after. That's not. Well, I guess it's still violence, but it's consensual. It's
Yeah.
that circle, and that's the difference. It's not necessarily what we do. It's crazy to strap on a couple of skis and fly down a mountain, but if we assume that risk and we know we want to do it and we consent to doing it, okay. We shouldn't. I mean, it's a dangerous act, jumping in the car, dangerous activity. But
Yeah.
we've obviously know the risks and we're doing it, and we've consented, and we think we know what we're doing, so we go drive the car. Doesn't mean you're always going to be safe, but that's as opposed to somebody just putting you on a pair of skis and throwing you down a mountain without you ever knowing anything about it. It's not the activity, it's that circle. And that's why the film's called Touch with the big O, which playing with the word ouch and touch.
Yeah.
But for me, the difference between violence and bad stuff isn't really the activity, it's actually the process.
Yeah.
Is there informed consent? Has there been negotiation? Is there some sort of follow up? Is the circle complete? If the circle is complete, then I think you're good to go. If you're just enforcing your will on somebody, even if it's like you must do the dishes, that's violence. So that to me is the secret. I think it's also the way forward for relationships. So many men, so many people are like, how am I supposed to behave around women these days? And what am I supposed to do? What are the rules? There are no rules. But the good news is you got to make up your own.
Yeah.
What conversation? You may find a modern person who wants to be 50's household wife, or maybe you want to be 50 household wife and she's going to be out there, selling Buicks at the dealership, whatever. But you get to make that up for yourself. And as opposed to living with some arbitrary rules that somebody made up before you were born, So going through that process of openly talking about what your interests are, having the comfort with that other human being that they're not going to judge you. There's an expression, your kink may not be my kink, but that's okay. I mean, no, I don't have to necessarily be cool with what you're cool with, but I have to do what you're interested in. I just have to give you the space to talk about it. And I think that's also gives people that space to be more honest to themselves.
Yeah. Who's been a hero for you? Who's been an inspiration for you in the work that you've done?
Probably Alan Watts. I really just enjoy a lot of us talking about Zen. There's a very famous person in the Kink community called Midori, who's a Japanese lady that came to America that knows just amazing stuff. And Fakir Musafar, who was one of the first people doing body modification. Um, these are people that come to mind that I've had been lucky enough to meet, and definitely heroes for sure. Esther Perel, I loved her book Mating in Captivity, talking about what it was to get relationships going. Sometimes it's the otherness, like seeing that person, familiarity breeds contempt, or so the expression goes. So sometimes the best way to spice up a relationship is to try and go back to the beginning a little bit and see your partner with fresh eyes again. Kink provides you a methodology, whether it's as simple as, okay, let's meet in a bar, pretend we don't know each other, and you have to pick us up, pick them. That's a kink scene,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
Fine, you're doing role play, great. But hey, if it works, it works.
Yeah.
So yeah, lots of heroes.
Years ago, I was in a short film here in Kansas City. It was in a
Mhm,
competition, and we filmed it over 2 or 3 days. And
mhm.
it was probably some of the most grueling work that I ever did. And it wasn't physically exacting. And I don't know that people understand how much goes in from A to Z, and especially with what you're doing. I mean, you're going from conception all the way through. You're operating with all these people. You're creatively getting in there. What is it that makes you do this every day to do these stories in such an exacting way? Because some may make money, some may not, but you're doing it
Oh,
obviously for the
most,
love.
most, most don't.
Right.
Well, why do you think I'm on the podcast circle? I can't afford advertising. I mean, um, it's the worst job in the entire world, but I can't think of anything better. I think it's just one of those things where you find yourself going, okay, yeah, this is, but what would you rather do? I can't think of anything I'd rather do. And the irony of film and music, if you're music oriented, um, the biggest irony is that if you're really good at it, you make it look easy. If you're really good at it, everybody, oh, I could have played that because
Right.
it sounds so perfect. or it looks so perfect. You think, well, shit, any kid could do that, right?
Yep.
Until you actually try to do it yourself. So
Uh-huh.
in a weird way, when someone says that looks easy, or I could do that, it's sort of it's a compliment, really, because whenever something's bad, when you see a bad movie or a bad piece of music, everybody knows it's bad. They won't be able to tell you why necessarily from a technical point of view, but they can say that sounds like whatever and looks like whatever. So yeah, art is a funny thing because the better you are at it, the easier it looks, and the more people think they could have easily done that themselves, you know? So yeah, you
So
have to do it because you love it.
yeah, no doubt. So of all of the filmmakers that are alive on the planet right now, if you could hang out with one of them, see how they operate, see how they roll, would there be one that you would like to hang out with?
Oh, for sure. Tarantino, for sure. He's also a kinky. He's open about being part of the kink community too. So we just love to talk to him, and his process is fascinating. How much time he takes and how he does it. And I love to him or uh, oh, I'm having a brain fart right now. Hmm. Oh God, David Lynch. He's
Oh
also very
yeah,
interesting.
$100%.
I've listened to a few stories. David Lynch has one of the best pieces of advice that I ever heard any filmmaker, and I always try and share it when I can. Making a movie requires you to come up with around 75 scenes. 75 good ideas. Just get a note card or recipe cards and write out 75 scenes and then sequence them and you have a movie. Just
Wow.
because it's more about the DNA. It's like I guess musically it would be about this bar, having a few bars and then deciding how you're going to arrange it. Because doing a whole movie is really daunting, but thinking about a scene, okay, a guy goes
Uh-huh.
on to Zoom and talks to a podcaster and they have a conversation that turns out XYZ. Okay, that's something I can write on a recipe card,
Yeah.
and put that in the movie somewhere and circulate. And I thought that's a really great way to think about making a movie. And also you might come up with a scene that you would have never written normally because it didn't really fit in normally, but it was such a cool scene. And then you find a place for it, which explains a lot of his filmmaking where you're like, wow, that was such a cool scene that's
Uh-huh.
so unprecedented to put there. Well, it's because he had the scene and he ended up figuring out what to do with it later.
In the
So,
2010s, there was a contest for a little while where you could submit and I think eat at a High Boy in LA with him. And I always used to put my name in the hat and thought it would be so cool to just sit down and slough it out. You know what reminds me of kind of what you're doing too? Exposing some of these subcultures that people aren't aware of. It reminds me of Chuck Palahniuk when he would weave in going to those support groups and you would see these cultures of people that were therapeutically trying to come to grips with things. It reminds me of that. But it's all so valid. And we all think that they're broken, but they're just like everybody else. They're just a little bit more raw and open about it, which is exactly the way your film is. It's like
mm.
everybody assumes it's such a weird, grotesque thing, but is it really? Because everybody has habits and things they hide. Is it more valorous to not hide it or be out in the open? It's like that's what I find so triumphant about the film is that these people don't have the baggage of hiding behind anything. They are totally out there.
Most people do. I think I was one of the first to get pretty unprecedented access
Yeah,
because there has been films making them look bad. So
right.
people were pretty nervous about being, knowing this was going to be shown to the vanilla community. But certainly I think there's a time, maybe it's like, 40 years ago with the gay community where people started coming out and some of those people took more heat than others. And some people probably still think it's a bit weird, but I think that's the minority now, at least in most places, I would think. Um, that's the process of starting with kink. A few people have to take a few hits and it'll become more eventually. Well, every study I've seen by everybody from the American psychiatric to the European psychiatric associations say that 35 to 45% of people are actually kinky. So it's just a massive number of people. Now, whether you are or not, you know, and it's also how do you want to define it? I mean, wearing Victorian swimwear now would be kinky, but it wasn't in Victorian
Yeah.
times. Uh, it's like everybody's probably done fuzzy handcuffs at this point. So I guess bondage actually technically isn't even kinky anymore. I mean, it's such an odd thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah.
So when you look at your life, all of you got this lineage of a creative line and then you as a human being, what are you ultimately the proudest of as you've evolved into who you are today?
Oh, without a doubt, this film, and I try. That's why it took me so long to make. Every film, to me, I want to say something, and I feel like trying to give some guidance in terms of how to live as a man or a person moving forward in that process of, you know, talking and getting clear consent and playing and doing aftercare and understanding you can be anyone you want to be. To me, that is absolutely the thing I'm most proud of at this point, professionally at least.
So, as the man behind the lens and the mastermind of these stories, everyone has a perception of you. Family, friends, fans, but you run the show. What's your
Mhm.
perception of you? Who do you think you are?
As a person, I've always felt more comfortable watching people. I remember working as a photographer. I loved having the little camera around my neck, and I'm 14 years old. I'm walking into these rooms of adults, and it felt like I'm here. This is my permission. And ever since then, I felt like, a voyeur with permission. I feel
Yeah.
like this in this life, I'm here just to sort of learn as much as I can. I've never really felt like someone who really wants to change the world. I just want to be someone who tries to see it and understand it and try and say what I think I've seen. That's it.
So,
Yeah,
Max,
voyeur, curious person. Proud of
yeah.
it.
So, I love this film. If anyone wants to watch it or if they want to delve into your world of film, anything, reach out, any of the good business in your world, where's the best place to go?
Touchkink.com.
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your time. Thank you
Thank
for
you for your time.
opening up your portal. I appreciate it. And best of luck with the film, man.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
Thank you. Cheers. Take care.